go to London and ask our guest, Ziad Abaza. He's a British actor. Ziad, good to get your perspective, especially as an actor working within this industry in the UK. I haven't watched Bodyguard. I've read a couple of the op-eds about it. I've seen some of the noise on social media. The fact that you had this character who ends up being a terrorist or somebody who wants to commit terrorist acts in the UK, who happens to be a Muslim woman who wears hijab, as an actor, is that problematic for you? Do the people who are angry about it, do they have a point?
I think one of the most important things when thinking about these issues is the psychological associations that get created when people are presented with such characters. So, for example, in this show that you're specifically referring to, within the first half an hour, you have this situation where you have the main character coming into a toilet that you assume is going to be empty. And to your surprise, you're immediately hit with this visual image of this woman in hijab carrying a bomb, looking with a face of terror and horror. Now, that is a very powerful phenomenon that really imprints itself on the psyche of viewers. Film as a medium is a very multi-sensory experience. So you are visually stimulated, you are stimulated by sound, you're also stimulated by the emotions through which you're going through. And when you come across an image like that, so you just see this hijab woman with a bomb looking in terror, it does imprint a sense of that in your mind. And unfortunately, what happens is if that's done well enough or done strongly enough or done enough times, what happens is you have average members of the public who unfortunately will go out and see women in hijab or whatever the association might be, and unfortunately carry that negative connotation upon viewing other very innocent members of the public.
Right. This is a crime show, right? So let me put it to you this way. Are you saying that Muslims can't be portrayed as terrorists, or that, hey, you know what, yes, Muslims can be portrayed as terrorists, but when you have a responsibility as a TV show, or if you're putting stuff out there as fiction, you also need to have a large number of characters who happen to be Muslim who are all sorts of other things as well, and not just terrorists. Is that the point?
I think that is absolutely the point. I think the overwhelming negative representation of Middle Easterns and Muslims on screen, or brown people in general, is something that is completely disproportionate, obviously, to the lived experience of people. I think the late Jack Shaheen had done a study where he showed that about 94% of all Muslim representations and Middle Eastern representations on the screen were negative, and 1% was positive, and the rest were neutral. So those kind of figures are very problematic, especially in a time where obviously, you're having an increase of violence against Muslims on the street, particularly to women who wear the headscarf, who are kind of notably Muslim, or the face veil. And I definitely do believe that these kind of images and these storylines are definitely perpetuating these kind of acts, you know, whether it's online violence or on the streets. So yes, you're right, we do need more kind of three-dimensional characters. We need characters that you might sympathize with. I wouldn't say that you should cut out representing Islam or Muslims, sorry, as being potentially involved in terrorism, because that is a reality that we have to deal with, and drama does need to deal with those things. But then to kind of isolate it and make that the only kind of or dominant representation is very problematic.
Right. That's a fair point. As an actor, when you go for a casting call or you get callbacks, I wonder, is most of it you being handed stuff where you've got stuff to read where you're like, I kill you, American infidel, I blow you up. Or, I mean, you know, that sort of thing. Is it mostly that sort of nonsense?
There is a lot of that, to be honest. Yeah, I guess personally I've been quite fortunate that I've kind of tried to avoid those. It's quite difficult sometimes because you don't want to be, you know, too problematic. Obviously, coming up, especially early on in your career. But I remember one actor was saying that, you know, we should try and take on these roles, but kind of like change the narrative and play it more sympathetic, or kind of have influence. And that's definitely one opinion which I think is valid. But from my experience, of course, as a young kind of, you know, actor of Middle Eastern origin, that is very common to kind of be, you know, I do this for my God, and you know that it's yeah, many times that's been the case.
So the show's creators, going back to Bodyguard and the noise around it, and again, full disclosure, I haven't watched Bodyguard. I did watch Line of Duty, created by the same director, writer, and so forth. And I was thinking back today, as I was doing my reading and in the build-up to this interview, I was thinking about the characters in Line of Duty. And I remember there was a crooked police detective, Sergeant Lenny James, who was black. There was some crooked kind of corrupt northerners who were white. There was also a Muslim character who was unfairly accused by the authorities. He just happened to be Muslim and they thought he was involved in a plot, but he was innocent. And so with all of that in mind, should we be giving the benefit of the doubt to the creators that they're just trying to sort of represent a mixed bag, the reality of stuff out there? And when you're dealing with crime, you're going to get a whole bunch of characters. And you know what? In this particular case, this just happens to be a Muslim woman.
Yeah, I can kind of sympathize that, and I actually believe that most of it isn't kind of malicious in intent. I don't believe there are people actively trying to like represent Islam as bad. I think that's the kind of schema of society right now, and that's just being reflective in the creative energy of a lot of these writers. So they're just maybe lazily kind of leaning off the kind of ambient culture, which is very kind of anti-Islam and very scared of terrorism, and using that as an idea within their creative process. So I wouldn't say there was necessarily blame on them, but at the same time, yes, you can kind of mix it up with like, okay, we've got a white bad guy as well, and we've got this guy's a bit suspect, and this Muslim was actually innocent. But then at the same time, the overwhelming dominance of the narrative is still that there's this projection, and very few positive. Like even in the example you just gave, it's like, okay, they weren't a terrorist, few, but the association was probably already built, and that's enough psychologically, going back to the first point, enough to kind of cement that idea in people's minds. So at least you're suspicious of them. But I think we definitely need to be moving more towards a positive sense. Why not have a woman in a headscarf who's actually a lead and who's actually doing great things? Why can't we go there rather than just be a case of it's either a terrorist or it's like they're innocent of being accused of terrorism. Do you know what I mean? Like, how about something positive?
Yeah, I can agree with that. So Ziad, very finally, my colleague told me that you were the guy in the movie. You were the guy who made doner meat out of customers in a kebab shop. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it was a film that I was, very, very happy to be a part of. One of the things which I really appreciated was the idea that here was like a kind of character of an ambiguous Middle Eastern place that wasn't to do with political Islam or terrorism or being a jihadi or anything like that. It was rooted in a story which had human themes, which you could have replaced that character with a dude working in a fish and chip shop and it would have still made sense. And that's why I was very happy to be part of that, and I felt like that's a good step towards coming away, creating kind of three-dimensional sympathetic characters that you can kind of root for in a way, and that's what we need to see more of.
I'm surprised the vegans haven't championed the movie yet. Ziad, good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us on the Newsmakers.